We're here today at the Manassas Museum, Manassas, Virginia, and we are going to learn about a man named James Peters, who lived from 1843 to 1923. He served in the Union Army in the 1st United States Colored Troops. Yes, James was a black man who lived in the area, and we are here to learn his story. So let's get into it. Here we go. So we are on a walk of the battlefield today. Well, hello friends, I'm Jason with Exploring History Together. Today we are at the Manassas Museum, and I've been given permission to film inside because of a particular display that I found in here a couple of months ago. I hope this video is going to be a real treat for you. I learned the name James Peters right here from this signboard, and his story intrigued me. The little bit of story that's here right now intrigued me enough to want to learn a lot more about this story. And let me tell you, the research has led me on all kinds of crazy goose chases over the past many weeks. So James was a black man, and up here is the only known photograph of James right there. He was born enslaved in 1843 in Southern Virginia. In the late 1850s, he escaped the watchful eye of Landon Carter and fled north. So far, I have been unable to find any real information about with whom he found safety in the years immediately following his escape to freedom. Only that he spent some time in the vicinity of Washington, D.C. and around Prince William County. But what we do know is that on June 17, 1863, 21-year-old James enlisted as a private in Company E of the 1st U.S. Colored Infantry Regiment at what was then called Mason's Island. You probably know it today as Roosevelt Island. It's right outside Washington, D.C. off the George Washington Parkway. James's service record states that he was not married and he was living with his mother in Prince William County at that time. So whether that's true or not, who knows, but that's what the service record stated. So James and his unit saw action in various places around Richmond and Petersburg. And on July 30th, 1864, they fought at the crater where many members of the U.S. colored troops were brutally massacred. The USCT were also present at the Battle of Fair Oaks in October 1864 and Fort Fisher in January 1865. It is recorded that James was wounded at Fair Oaks. So right up here on the wall, the museum has James's service rifle. This is a U.S. model 1842 Harper's Ferry musket, gifted to the museum by a Peters family descendant, Raymond Charles Peters. This piece is in amazing shape and almost looks like after a good cleaning it could be made to fire again. You can also see where James carved his initials, JMP, right into the stock. James Montgomery Peters. So James and Josephine had 9 children, and one died very young. Susie Peters died in 1898 at 18 years old, and she's buried right beside her father, who died in 1923. It is well documented that the Peters family were members at Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and after James's death, Josephine was known as the oldest living member of the church. She left the area in 1940 to live with her daughter Dovey in Washington, D.C., and that is Dovey right there. Dovey ran a funeral home in Washington. So when I started working on this project, the James Peters record on Find a Grave was not connected to any of his family, and nor were any of the rest of the family associated in any way. As a matter of fact, 5 of the children didn't even have grave records, so I created them. Today, I'm happy to report that James, Josephine, and all 9 children are listed together on Find a Grave, as well as even now some grandchildren as well. The trails led that way, and I was able to get them connected. I've personally visited each of the 9 children's graves, taken photos and GPS readings, and also updated their records to include every single shred of information I have acquired during this crazy adventure. So to the Find a Grave members who own the memorial records for the other 4 kids, as well as mom and dad's records, I appreciate you accepting my edit suggestions so quickly. All right, so from here, we're going to be visiting the place where the Peters family built their homestead. We're going to check out the home in Washington, D.C., where Josephine lived out her final years with her daughter, Dovey. We're going to stop in at both James and Josephine's grave sites, and I will also include many of the photos that I have acquired pertaining to the Peters family. Pictures of all of the children's graves, etc., and a couple other things. But before we move on, I do want to express my gratitude to a few people who have assisted me greatly behind the scenes. Carrie Carmichael in Waterville, Maine. She has been hugely instrumental in gathering names and dates and pictures and military service records for the Peters family. She told me at the start of this project that no inquiry was off limits, and I gave her some big challenges. But boy, did she come through, so thank you, Carrie. Malcolm Moore on the staff at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery in Suitland, Maryland. This guy came out in the crazy summer heat on 2 separate occasions to help me first find Josephine's grave and then 5 of her children on the next occasion when I went back out. That cemetery is huge. There's over 10,000 people buried there. And Malcolm definitely went above and beyond to help me find what I was looking for. So I appreciate that a lot. Over at the National Battlefield Park Visitor Center in Manassas, I'd like to say thanks to Park Ranger Gregory Wolf for pointing me in the right direction to find the Peters' old homestead. You saved me a lot of wandering in the woods, and I do appreciate that. Janet Robinson and Deacon Peterson at Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, thank you so much for showing me Frankie Struther's unmarked grave. I would have never found that without you and your map. I want to say thank you to Lisa Sieveloten, the Acting Communications Director for the City of Manassas, for permission to fly a drone over the museum for our aerial shots. And lastly, also thank you to Manassas Museum Curator Mary Helen Dellinger for both permission and access to record this segment of the Peters video here today. So grab your snacks and your favorite drinks and let us go exploring history together. After the Civil War ended, James returned to Prince William County and managed to find himself a job as a laborer at a farm near Haymarket, Virginia. This farm was owned by James and Martha Steele, Quakers from Pennsylvania who had taken up residence in Virginia. James and Martha had previously taken in a young orphan during the war, a white girl named Josephine who was around 15 years old when they met. The Steeles never officially adopted her, but brought Josephine into their home as though she were their very own daughter. Josephine shared with them her memories of her family's home being shelled in the early days of the war. I haven't been able to find any information on what happened to her biological parents, but it is reasonable to assume that they died because of the war. Josephine was born in 1849, and I did find references to her last name possibly being Sanctuary, but that has been extremely difficult to verify. While working and living on the Steele farm, James and Josephine fell in love, and in the late 1860s they left the farm to begin a life together. At some point they married, in spite of the fact that interracial marriage was illegal in Virginia. They acquired roughly 10 acres of land from the Cross family, who owned a lot of acreage near what is now Featherbed Lane in Manassas. We're currently driving on Featherbed Lane right now. On screen is a portion of William Brown's 1901 Prince William County map that shows the Cross property very clearly marked. This map is still used today by many local researchers because of the family names that appear all over it. While I do not know where the boundary lines of the Peters family farm ran, I did get a great tip from National Battlefield Park Ranger Greg Wolf on where to find the remains of the homestead. We will be visiting that place very shortly. So we are taking a walk back now to try and find the homestead of James Peters and Josephine, where they would have built their farmhouse. And it's back down this trail. Let me stop just a moment. I'll show you where we are on this map. So right now, this is a Manassas battlefield map, and we are headed right to the tip of my thumb there, at that little corner right there, at the unfinished railroad loop. And this is where the park rangers told me that we could find the remains of the farmhouse. Now, I was out here a couple of weeks ago for my first look at it, and I can tell you there's not much left, but there are some signs. And we're going to go take a look at those. Just so you see, at one point this was probably a horse and buggy trail here. And this would have been the way that the Peters would have probably ridden their cart and horse to church on Sunday. And we will end up at the church there as well. Coming up, as that is where James is buried. Josephine is elsewhere. As this is a little bit of a walk, I'm going to turn the camera off at this point, and I'll bring it back on when we're just about there. Okay, so we are at the spot on the map where the park ranger pointed out was the location. So I stood here for a couple minutes, and I just looked left and right when I first came back here to say, if I were looking to build a log cabin, where would I want to put it? And over here on the left, the trail, the landscape just kind of drops off down there. There may be water down there, I'm not sure. But I looked over here to the right, and we've got this little rise that goes up here to a plateau on the top. And I thought that looks like a good place to potentially put a home. So we'll take a walk back up in here. You notice how there's so much green around this area. Then we get up in here, and this area is all brown here. And as we walk around, we start to see piles of these rocks, these fist-sized rocks here. They're all over the place. And to me, this almost screams house foundation, or a wall around a garden kind of a thing, but they're all over the place up here. But just take a look. See this brown area, but it's surrounded by total green. Nice place to put a home if I were looking to build a home. So, believing this to be the location of James and Josephine's home. And again, like I said earlier, they had roughly 10 acres that they farmed all around this area. And eventually, one of their sons, Montgomery James, took over some of the property, and his home was built out in that direction. And I see wide open field over there. So we're going to take a walk out that way and see what we see. This is what's out on the other side of those trees that we were just looking at. I'll show you that tree line right here. So right over on the other side of those is where we just were with the Peters home. So chances are good that this was a lot of their property was right here. So we're going to take a walk further back. Well, I've been walking around a lot, and things just aren't seeming to line up. However, based on where I'm standing, looking at my little blue dot on Google Maps, right up there at the top of that hill would be where Montgomery James, one of James Peters' sons, would have built their home. And if I can get my hands on the photo where that home is visible beyond the Groveton Cemetery, I believe it stands right up there on that hill, up there. And if I find it, I will put it right here at this spot in the video so you can look at it from across a long way across the field from the Groveton Cemetery when it was still standing. Well, I've now been walking through, let's see if I can get this focused here, this whole loop right here around my thumb right there. I walked that whole loop and we're back up at the gate now right here at this this corner. That's the road up ahead of us. And I'm going to walk out and walk back to my car, which is up here at the upper parking area. And that's where we're going to end this segment of this video. But stay tuned. There's more to come. Stay with me. We're not done with James Peters' story yet. So we're on what's known now as Roosevelt's Island. It was originally known as Mason's Island. And Mason's Island is where James Peters joined the first U.S. Colored Troops Regiment, right here, at somewhere right here around where we're standing right now, 1863 of June 1863. It's quite possible that he's even in this picture right here. This says, members of the 1st United States Colored Troops stand in formation under the command of white officers about 1863. Soldiers learned Army basics and lived in barracks on Mason's Island, now called Theodore Roosevelt Island. So come on over here and take a look at this. Right here, this says, Union troops occupied this island 1 month after the Civil War broke out in April 1861. Following the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, African Americans that enlisted in the Union Army trained to fight here. Once prepared for battle, these soldiers of the 1st United States Colored Troops went on to serve the Union with distinction. Subsequent USCT regiments fought in the Spanish-American War in Cuba, where Lieutenant Colonel Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders gained fame in 1898. So it is entirely possible, although unverified, our man James Peters may be standing in those ranks right there. Well, we've made our way to the churchyard where we'll find the grave of James Peters. First, I want to point this out. It's an interesting historical fact here. Jenny Dean, that is a name that is known well around Prince William County. I'll read this. Jenny Dean, 1852 to 1913, was born in slavery near here, a pioneer in the advancement of education and religion among the black citizens of Prince William and neighboring counties. Miss Dean founded the Manassas Industrial School for Colored Youth in 1894 and Mount Calvary Baptist Church in 1880. The Manassas Centennial Commission proclaimed her Woman of the Century, and she is buried in the church cemetery nearby. We will take a look at her grave while we're here, but of course James Peters is the main reason where we came here. But this is a very interesting historical fact that I kind of stumbled over as I was researching this. But this is the church where James and Josephine attended. This church was founded in 1880, the Mount Calvary Baptist Church here. And in 1923, when James died, and he's buried here, of course, it was known that Miss Josephine was the oldest living member of the church. And I happen to know that this building is still in use today. I was here a couple of weeks ago and doing my research, and a group of people came out, and they'd been having a prayer service in there. So I was able to speak to the pastor at that time, or the bishop, I think is what they called him. But very interesting that this is still in use. So we'll go down here and we'll take a real quick peek at Jenny Dean's grave. Well, this one right here in the center of your screen is the grave of Jenny Dean. And again, she's a well-known name around the county that I live in, Prince William County, Virginia, right? Manassas, Virginia. The school I went to for the 8th grade, as a matter of fact, was Jenny Dean Middle at the time, middle school. It has been an elementary school for a very long time. But this is Jenny's grave. And I believe at one point, yeah, Jenny Dean Club of Manassas, Virginia, 1954. Apparently that's when this grave was kind of refreshed, and they fixed up the stonework and maybe added this. I'm not sure what it looked like originally, but that does almost seem like it was added on. But all right, just a short little ways down from here, we will find James Peters. And here is James right here. I'm going to straighten that up since it's looking a little bent there. But we have Civil War veteran James Peters, June 1843 to February 1923. And it says, he has fought a good fight. He has finished his course, by his wife, Josephine Peters, right there at the bottom. And here we have the Civil War thing there. But right beside him, this was a little bit of a surprise, but this is what brought me into looking into all of his children. Susie M. Peters, September 3rd, 1879 to April 19, 1898. She died at 18 years old. She was buried before her father right here in this place, and he was buried beside her when he died in 1923. The gravesite of James Peters and Susie Peters. We're in Washington, D.C. to see the home where Josephine spent her final years. Prior to this recording, I was given permission to video the exterior by the current homeowner. I thank you very much, Juanita. When James died in 1923, Josephine continued living on the family farm in Manassas. She attempted to collect James's military pension, but was denied because she was white, and interracial marriage was illegal in Virginia. In 1940, she lost her eyesight. Being blind proved too challenging, so she moved to D.C. to share this home with her daughter, Dovie Brooks. In the 1930s, Dovie had been a business manager at the Washington Tribune, as well as the co-owner of the Washington World. According to an article dated June 26, 1943, Dovie left the news business and became a funeral director. She turned her home here at 1200 Florida Avenue into the Dovie G. Brooks Funeral Home. About 5 years later, it became co-owned, and the name became Dovie G. Brooks and Otis F. Allen Funeral Home. Funerals were held here from 1943 into the early 1960s. Dovie died in 1968 and is buried only a few steps from her mother. On April 17, 1949, Josephine's 100th birthday was celebrated here. She was surrounded by 68 living descendants. It's reported that she said, "I don't feel a day over 50. Near the beginning of October 1949, Mrs. Peters fell and broke her hip. She was hospitalized and died 11 weeks later on December 26, 1949. Her family stated that up until this incident, Josephine had never suffered a single serious illness in her life. These photos are of the church in D.C. where Josephine's funeral was held. This church was founded in 1863 by 21 former slaves who escaped Fredericksburg, Virginia, under Union Army protection. In the beginning, they organized a simple Sunday school on L Street Northwest. Over the decades to follow, it grew into the large ministry that lives here today. The current building was built around 1998. According to the historical timeline on Shiloh's current website, Josephine's funeral took place in their fourth building, which was built around 1924. Her service was officiated by Reverend Earl Harrison. So we're in the Lincoln Cemetery in Suitland, Maryland right now, going to find the grave of Josephine Peters. Up in front of us there is Malcolm, who was the super nice gentleman that I spoke to on the phone a couple of weeks ago. And he said when I came up here, I was to ask for him by name, and he would get us right there to the grave site. So that's what we're doing right now. It's a real pretty cemetery here. Very well kept, but it's huge. I'm glad I got somebody to guide me in here. We could be searching for weeks trying to find this lady, but he's going to get us straight there.
We would not have found this.
Not at all. But here we are. Let's go find her grave now. Well, here we are at the Lincoln Cemetery in Suitland, Maryland. And this is the beautiful final resting place for Josephine Peters. And our friend Malcolm at the cemetery office brought us up here. We would have never found this place if we'd been doing it just on our own. So I'm very, very grateful to Malcolm on the cemetery staff here. He brought us up and showed us. Now, Josephine does not have a big marker like these that are here on this row. Josephine has a flat ground marker. And here she is. Mother Josephine Peters, 1849, 1949. And this would be a footstone And her grave would be right there, right above it. So beautiful view up here. It's a beautiful day in Maryland. Again, the final resting place of Josephine Peters. Well, here we are back at the Manassas Museum where we started this whole story, and I thought it'd be good to wrap it up here at this spot. And I have with me a real special guest that I was hooked up with by Mary Helen of the museum here. This is Mason Compton, and he is the great 3 G's grandson of James Peters. So really good to have you with me.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being able to get out here. I wasn't sure that was going to happen, but Mary Helen was able to connect me with Maurice, Mason's dad, and with with Mason here. And so we got a family member part of the video. But now that you've had an opportunity to see it, and they're watching it now, of course, too. But now that you've had an opportunity to watch it, what do you think?
I think it's a great video. You know, not just the video, but the story itself of James. You know, I think my family is gonna, especially my dad. You know, he's me and him are very big into our family history. But I think all of our other family will be very excited to, you know, one, hear about the story itself, two, you know, see that our family's in a museum. But I also think it's just a very cool thing that, I mean, obviously every family has history, but, you know, the fact that ours is in a museum and, you know, it, just his story itself was pretty cool. Yeah, I think it's great.
I'm glad that I was able to make it happen, and for all the help. By the way, I want to say thanks to a lot of people. I said thank you to a number of people at the beginning. That remains the same. To everyone who assisted me along the way with, you know, permission and names and dates and etc. Thank you very much for all the help. There were a couple of, when I was looking up information online on this family, there were a couple of instances where I found conflicting stories, and I kind of had to pick one to follow that line along. And I always tried to go with that, with the people that I would have thought would have put the most amount of research into things. So if I got anything wrong, I'm sorry. Did the very best I could with what I had to work with. But I hope you enjoy the video. I hope my viewers enjoy it. I hope your extended family, of course, loves it. I really do. Please share it everywhere that history videos are appreciated. And please remember to subscribe to the channel so that you get notified the next time I put something out. Thank you very much for watching, and I really appreciate your viewership. So we'll see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.